from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Rural route hero.
We take care of each other out here.
How one man showed grit with grace when a rancher faced a terrifying accident. As fertilizer prices continue to rise, a new challenge emerges. What impact Russia could have on the market as farmers battle higher fuel costs.
$1,000 or 1,000-gallon tank is $4,000.
What some are doing to try and balance their bottom lines right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Skyrocketing gas prices are hitting everyone where it hurts, and the bigger your tank, the harder the hit. And for farmers and equipment with 1,000-gallon tanks, those costs are astronomical. As Vanessa Yurkovich reports, some farmers are taking a gamble, hoping to balance out drastic prices and turn a profit.
Every day, up to twice a day, like clockwork, Josh Everhart makes this trip, hauling corn and soy to the grain elevator in town. But the constant hauling of crops for his 4 trucks and record gas prices makes even the shortest journey feel like a slow burn.
You don't want to see the bill.
You don't? What does
You
it
look at it
like?
and you're like, oh no.
What is it looking like?
Well, I mean, $1,000 or 1,000-gallon tank is $4,000.
Gas prices hit a record last week, but are dropping slightly, yet still above $4 a gallon nationally and here in Indiana. Even steeper, diesel, which fills these tanks at nearly $5 a gallon.
It's astronomical, but you know, it's part of doing business.
Chris Everhart, Josh's father, says inflation has pushed prices up on just about everything on their farm, but commodity prices have risen too. This month, wheat rose to its highest price since 2008.
I've never seen anything like this in the wheat market.
For only the second time in 25 years, the Everhart family planted winter wheat, 165 acres of it, to try to capitalize on rising wheat prices. But it's a risky bet.
That's fuel, seed, fertilizer, and labor. And Russia's invasion into Ukraine is only pushing prices higher.
This is uncharted territory.
On Phil Ramsey's farm in Shelbyville, he says he's spending $500,000 more to plant his crops this year.
How much does what is happening in Ukraine impact you here on the farm?
I'm happy that the prices are going up. I am not happy about the situation because even though they're a competitor of ours, it's kind of like playing sports. You don't want to see somebody on the other team get hurt.
And fertilizer has become their biggest expense because it's made from natural gas, which has also risen significantly. A key supplier, Russia, has stopped exporting it.
How much more does it take to fill up those bins behind me this year compared to last year?
Today's cost is $60,000 more per tank. I have 4 tanks. That's $240,000.
And those prices are much slower to come down compared to the volatile price of crops.
We just lose money when that happens. It's only happened a few times in my farming career, but this one's totally different than any that I've been through in 43 years.
Vanessa Yurkovich reporting. Right now, farmers face anhydrous ammonia prices at $1,500 per ton. And Russia's decision to stop exporting fertilizer for the remainder of this year is yet another issue for an industry already hit with black swan events. Josh Linville of Stone X Group tells us that Russia is a major player in global fertilizer production, but he says even with Russia pulling out of the world market, it doesn't create a worst-case scenario for availability and prices. He says China really holds the car for that scenario, as Russia and China combined account for 40 to 45% of total global phosphate production.
We are still working with the idea that China is going to come back to the export market in June of this year. If China steps out and says what you're doing to Russia is like an attack on us, we are going to attack, we're going to take over Taiwan. We start to do the same thing to China that the rest of the world has done to Russia. It gets worse than where we're at today.
Now, Linville says the markets seem to be waiting and watching to see what happens with China. And we're told President Joe Biden and China's Xi Jinping did speak on Friday for nearly 2 hours via a video call. It comes as the White House looks to deter Beijing from providing military or economic assistance for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. According to the White House, President Biden said Chinese firms would pay a major price if China backs Russia. A kind of ag commodity pop-up is coming to the port of Seattle. USDA announcing it is opening a temporary site to house ag containers for shipping. It is partnering with the Northwest Seaport Alliance to increase access to a 40-acre pop-up site. The site will accept either dry agricultural or refrigerated containers for temporary storage. The idea? To reduce operational hurdles and costs so ag products can be more quickly loaded onto ships and sent out. The hope is to reduce port congestion and disruptions in the supply chain. The Northwest Seaport Alliance saw a near 30% decline in the export of ag commodities in the last 6 months of last year, and the ratio of loaded versus empty container exports has shifted to predominantly empty containers since May of 2021. Now, a similar pop-up site was launched at the Port of Oakland earlier this month. Spring is ushering in more severe weather for the South. Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire joins us with the very latest. Andrew.
That's right. We're continuing to watch severe weather that is likely today across eastern Texas, and we're going to eventually see this expanding eastward as well over the next several days. Tuesday right on into Wednesday. We're watching the potential here for possibly a few long track tornadoes, damaging wind gusts, flooding, all remain on the menu as we kick off this week. And it's really all associated with this low pressure system that is going to continue to strengthen across to Texas. And behind that is a cold front, and that's going to usher in some cooler air as we go throughout mid and the latter half of this week for parts of the Midwest and northeastern states. And looking at the precipitation here, as we have gone through this past weekend, the Great Lakes, deep south once again have picked up the moisture, nothing really for the western coast. But as we go throughout Monday and Tuesday of this week here, let's say that deep red really starts to take hold of the Tennessee, Mississippi River Valley. That's our next round that we have to watch for the potential for some heavier pockets of rain, all to develop thanks to that low pressure system moving through as we start off this week. I'll have more in your forecast coming up.
Volatile markets have made it hard on grain sellers. We'll discuss what it means at the farm coming up next. And later, a civil servant turned hero on the back roads of Virginia. A story of grit with grace in the country. And who's still in the game after a wild weekend? Our 2022 Bracket Busters Challenge, presented by Case IH, is underway. Now through April 4th, you can check out the leaderboard at agweb.com/bracket-busters. It's farmers versus farmers, and first place gets $1,000. Check out who's on top right now.
Find farm equipment on Machinery Pete's March 22nd online auction. No reserve, no buyer fees. Start bidding now at auctions.machinerypete.com.
We're joined today by John Payne, the author of This Week in Grains and Oilseeds. And John, as we look at the markets from last week, obviously we continue to watch this volatility and these kind of big swings up and down. Where are we today and what's happening in this market?
Well, we're kind of where we've been the last couple of weeks. So, we get a lot of huge ranges, especially in the wheat markets, corn to a certain degree, but we've actually kind of fallen back into a range here where we'll trade up 20, down 30 or 40, and then really come back by Friday's close into kind of the opening range for the markets of the week. So it's very important in everybody's kind of lexicon here as we start entering the growing season. Don't get too close to these markets. It's 20 cent move, 20 cents down, up really doesn't change a whole lot. And I think at this point in time, for us on the business side of things, we're trying to figure out are these contracts even worth using as hedges anymore? It's really more of a European thing, but the problem over the last 3 weeks has been we've seen tremendous amount of hedge losses from the merchandising side where they sold Matif wheat, they've sold CBOT wheat, really more in the Chicago than the Kansas City, but we've seen then those huge moves up in the futures. We're not seeing the cash follow, and that's a dangerous spot because those enterprises are losing money on physical hedges, but they're not making any money on the physical cash. So it creates a tremendous amount of downstream pressure for them to exit hedges, not hedge anymore, and then we're at a point here where I think that could even open us to more swings down the road. So my big advice to folks would be find a home for the grain. I know there's always been the saying of the HTA, which is a futures contract sale through the elevator, so to speak, and then you price the basis later. I would price the basis now because down the road, if you see these explosions in markets, you don't want to have the basis exposed, because in reality, you could take a hedge loss of $2 or $3 on the paper contract, and maybe the cash price only goes up $1. So be careful here.
All right, well, it'd be something to watch. Obviously, a lot of volatility and movement in these markets. Appreciate the advice. Thank you so much, John. We'll be back with more AgDay coming up in just a minute.
To find John's newsletter, This Week in Grain and Oilseeds, head over to www.thisweekingrain.com. AgDay is brought to you by Germinator Closing Wheels. Germinator, it's not just any closing wheel. Reach your yield potential. Pre-order by March 31st with coupon code AgDay for $2 shipping per wheel. AgDay weather is brought to you by Zoetis. Even though calves don't wait for perfect weather to arrive, you can count on Zoetis to be there. Share a picture of your newest calf and you could win a calving season survival kit. Enter now at calvingseason.com.
A fire late last week scorched tens of thousands of acres in West Texas. Now here are a couple looks at the Eastland Complex fire. People in multiple counties were ordered to evacuate and several shelters were set up. Now the Texas Department of Public Safety also requesting part of State Highway 153 be closed because of the heavy smoke. And Andrew, as we look at these fires, obviously it's a pretty dry situation. Looking at the drought monitor, it's been dry for a while.
It has been, and if you just look at just Texas itself, you see a lot of red there, especially across the north and western part of Texas. And again, that's just aiding into the dry fuel that is out there for these fires to really continuing on to rage on across the western and northern parts of Texas. And as we zoom on in here to the Intermountain West, again, we really have been lacking that snowfall all winter long, and that is going to aid in worsening, unfortunately, of this drought monitor across much of the western coast here. And as we revisit that spring drought outlook that was just released yesterday, we're going to kind of see this drought worsening here for the western half of the country, plain states and westward. Meanwhile, the Great Lakes, deep south and northeast, really no signs yet of any prolonged drought conditions as we go throughout the spring months, April, May, and going into that summer month there of June. We are watching still that above normal precipitation for the Great Lakes area. Meanwhile, again, dry, where we do not need that drier weather out across much of the western half of the country. And as we take a look at those spring temperatures, they're going to be well above average, most likely for the Four Corners and in fact much of Texas as well. And as we expand across the country, no doubt here that we're going to see likely above average temperatures if we can see those soils remaining somewhat on the drier side. That allow those soil temperatures to skyrocket up there and allow that air temperature to continue to rise as well. Going forward this week, though, it's not going to feel much like spring out there. We're going to see those temperatures slightly below normal into this bluer shaded area here, which does encompass much of the plain states, much of the Midwestern and Great Lakes states as we head towards this last full week of March. And precipitation for the most part is going to be dry across much of the lower 48 with really the only good chance of moisture mainly across the eastern seaboard for this week. And as we take a look at that precipitation trend, those deeper reds showing up there across the Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio River Valley. That's why we have to watch out for some prolonged flooding issues where we could be looking at more rainfall amounts of around 2+ inches of precipitation. And looking at this jet stream for this Monday, we're going to continue to watch this low pressure around Texas continuing to strengthen, and this is going to allow for severe weather to develop across parts of the deep south once again, as well as ushering cooler air across the Great Lakes and upper Midwestern states as we go throughout the mid and latter half of this last full week of March. Let's get a check closer to home. Dollar Bay, Michigan, times of sun and clouds, snow developing late. We're going to see the high right around 34 degrees. Going over to Longview, Texas, watching the potential for a few stronger storms to develop, high 72. And going into Marion Forks, snow to rain.
Machinery Pete is talking about green tractors today, but not the same kind of green you may be thinking of.
Well, the folks at AGCO have been making a big push with the Fendt brand. Of course, the last few years we've seen and heard a lot about the Ideal Combine, and on the planter side, the Momentum Planter. Now, from my perspective, I have been seeing more Fendt tractors show up for sale at auction. In fact, the last week, I've seen 7. Just last Thursday on St. Patty's Day on a farm auction in Geneva, Indiana, we saw 4 Fendt tractors sold by the good folks at Schrader Real Estate and Auction. Now, they had a pair of 2020 Fendt 724s, One had 355 hours on it, that sold for $207,000. And one with 608 hours, a few more hours, that went for $203,000. Now that same sale had a pair of 2021 Fendt 828s. And while we're on the topic of Fendt 828s, they had a little older one, a 17 model, a few more hours, 2,875 hours on it. That brought $167,500. And then they had a couple larger Fendts. They had a 16 model 1038, 1,251 hours on it. That sold for $281,000. And a 17 model 1042 with 821 hours. That went for $301,000. And folks, I think this trend's going to continue. I think we're going to see more new Fendt tractors sold and more of them starting to show up for sale at auction.
All right, thanks, Greg. Now, what would you do if you were injured and in the middle of nowhere? How this Virginia man survived a serious accident thanks to help from a friendly face. Next.
The 2022 Bracket Busters Challenge, presented by Case IH, is underway. Who's still in the game? To find out, head to AgWeb now through April 4th to check the leaderboard.
Grit with Grace is brought to you by Zoetis. Your dedication runs deep, and it fuels everything Zoetis does. To protect and support cattle and those who care for them, we are born of the bond. Learn more at bornofthebond.com.
A year ago, Virginia cattleman John Moody's daily routine took a tragic turn. While feeding his herd, a farming accident left him stranded. But a familiar face delivered a rescue that embodies grit and grace. Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan has a story.
Nestled in the southwest corner of Virginia is a lush landscape that serves as the backdrop every day for Alan Dix.
This is part of my 75-mile mail route that I travel 6 days a week.
A route he knows by memory is one he traveled a year ago, just like any other day, until he came across a scenario that seemed out of place as a local farmer's tractor was in the fence and still running.
Normally I just pull off the side of the road and pull off in the ditch and let it idle there, and I go across the road, open the gate, and come back and get on the tractor. Well, I did that and I wasn't paying any attention. I turned around, started back to the tractor and looked up, and here come the tractor.
He says his first instinct was to try to jump on.
My right leg got caught under the back tire and it just pulled me under. Thought I was paralyzed. I couldn't move either one of my legs.
And in that moment, he knew his only chance of survival was to lie back down and wait.
I kept thinking, well, sooner or later the mailman will come.
And after about an hour,
and sure enough, finally the mailman came.
Alan Dix came by right on schedule.
He called the rescue squad and called my wife.
John didn't have a cell phone with him at the time, so able to give him my phone.
As the ambulance showed up and rescued John, Alan didn't miss a beat.
And then I finished the mail route.
After all, to Alan, that's just what you do.
We take care of each other out here. We look after each other.
As for John, he was flown to Wake Forest Baptist Hospital in North Carolina, where there he spent 15 days. But the road to recovery took several months.
I had one neighbor came and fed my cattle for the rest of the winter. Then I had another one come and vaccinated all my calves.
While John Moody was shown so much love the months after the accident, to John and Debbie Moody, there's only one hero.
Alan is truly a hero. He will always be a hero to the Moody family because of his quick thinking, and he was able to assess the situation when he got there.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the hero title.
And while Alan says he was just doing his job, he's not your typical mail carrier. Instead, he's a humble hero who delivered a rural route rescue significant enough to receive the U.S. Postal Service's Hero Award last fall. As for John, his recovery has been a year in the making.
I had been thinking about cutting back on my cattle. Well, while I laid there, I thought, well, this might be a good time just to sell all of them. So that's what I did once I got better.
But John's story also has a happy ending because almost a year after John survived the tractor accident and sold off all his cows knowing he couldn't care for them, he just bought 19 head of cattle to graze again. Affirmation that when you have enough heart and passion, It's a way of life that not even tragedy can take away.
All right, thanks, Ty. Now you can hear more of these heartwarming stories online. The QR code that you see on your screen will take you directly to our Grit with Grace landing page, including all of the stories from the past year. And that's going to wrap us up for this Monday morning. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great week out in farm country.